welcome back to Serene Slumber Tales. Tonight, there is no rush, nowhere to be, and nothing you need to remember. You can simply listen, or not listen at all, and allow the story to pass by like rain against a window, present, gentle, and never asking for your attention all at once. If your thoughts wander, let them wander. If the words fade and return again, that too is part of the journey. The world we'll gently wander through tonight is an old one, older than roads, perhaps older than maps. A place of winding paths, quiet forests, tired travelers, and stories carried in whispers more often than in songs. No one ever arrives here quickly. Even memories take their time. Imagine the faint glow of lantern light inside a roadside tavern, its windows fogged by warmth meeting the chill of evening air. The glass trembles softly whenever the wind presses against it, as though the outside world wishes to listen in. The air smells of wood smoke and damp cloaks, of leather gloves drying beside a hearth, and bread left too long near the embers but eaten anyway, because warmth matters more than perfection. Somewhere a mug is set down carefully, not loudly, never loudly, and a chair creaks as someone shifts after a long road. Outside, rain falls patiently across muddy paths, each drop choosing its own place upon the earth, and somewhere far away a wolf calls into the dark, though even that sound feels distant, softened by the night and carried through layers of trees before it ever reaches human ears. The roads here are not straight roads. They bend without reason, circle hills they could have crossed, and vanish briefly into tall grasses before reappearing, as if embarrassed by their own disappearance. Travelers follow them anyway, trusting habit more than direction. They walk beside slow rivers that reflect no stars when clouds pass overhead, and they rest beneath ancient branches that have seen generations arrive and depart without ever learning their names. In such places, time does not stop, but it loosens. Hours stretch gently. A moment can last as long as a memory chooses to hold it. In lands like these, stories are rarely told from beginning to end. They circle, they repeat, they pause halfway through because someone remembers a detail differently. A traveler begins a tale near the fire and finishes it days later beside a different one, forgetting he ever changed listeners. Children hear fragments and grow into adults who believe those fragments were always complete. Sometimes the same story is told with a hero, sometimes without one at all. And no one argues, because certainty is less important than familiarity. The story is not a puzzle to solve. It is a companion for the road. And among all those stories, one tale appears again and again, always incomplete, always recognized. A tale about a child, a bloodline, and a destiny nobody quite understands. Some say the child was seen once in a market square beneath falling snow. Others claim she never walked among crowds at all, only through forests where the branches lowered as if to listen. A few insist she lived long ago. Others are certain she has not yet arrived. Each version sounds believable while it is being told, and uncertain once it ends. When describing it, as if afraid the night might recognize it as kin. They speak softly when describing it, as if afraid the night itself might overhear and grow curious. Those who believe this version often smile gently, the way people do when discussing distant hope, not because they expect to see it, but because it comforts them to imagine it exists somewhere beyond the next hill. These tellers lower their voices for a different reason, not reverence but caution, as though speaking too clearly might invite the story closer to reality than they prefer. Most simply call it the elder blood, and leave the meaning behind the words unexamined. The name itself has weight enough. It drifts through taverns, across ferries, through campsites shared by strangers who never meet again. It rests in half-remembered lullabies and unfinished letters. People repeat it not because they understand it, but because they recognize the feeling it carries, the sense that something important once happened, or will happen, or perhaps always happen somewhere just beyond the reach of ordinary lives. Tonight, we won't try to solve it. We won't trace genealogies or untangle prophecies or decide which version deserves belief. Instead, we'll do what the people of that world do when night grows long and roads stretch endless ahead. We will sit beside the story without asking it to explain itself. We'll watch it the way one watches distant lanterns on a hill, aware they belong to someone somewhere, yet content never to know exactly whom. Because sometimes stories are best experienced the way people in that world experience them, slowly, imperfectly, and without needing every answer before sleep finds you. The mind does not rest easily when every mystery demands a solution. But when a tale is allowed to remain unfinished, it becomes gentle enough to drift beside dreams. The rain continues. The fire settles into steady warmth. The traveler listening beside you may already be asleep, though you never notice when their breathing softened. So settle in, breathe slowly, and let the road stretch ahead of us. There will be no sudden turns tonight, no urgency waiting beyond the trees, only the steady rhythm of footsteps, the quiet presence of distant memories, and the comfort of knowing that not every story needs an ending to feel complete. Long before kingdoms rose and fell, before wars had names or borders were carved into maps, there were those who believed the future was not something that simply happened, but something that could be guided gently into place, not forced, not conquered, not seized in a single moment of triumph, but shaped slowly, carefully, over lifetimes that would never live to see the outcome. They did not raise armies or banners. They kept records, watched cycles, and trusted patience more than power. To them, time was not an enemy but a tool, and they were willing to spend it in amounts no ruler ever could, centuries at a time. They watched the stars in silence, not searching for omens of disaster, but for patterns that repeated just often enough to suggest intention behind the chaos of the sky. They noticed how certain alignments returned like distant echoes, how years separated by generations could still mirror one another. When the heavens shifted, they marked it. When the patterns held, they remembered it. They believed the world moved in rhythms too large for a single life to understand, and so they committed themselves to listening across many lives instead of only one. They studied magic in much the same way, not as a weapon, but as a language. Where others saw flashes of power, they saw structure. Where others demanded immediate results, they preferred quiet observation. Magic to them was not meant to dominate the world, but to harmonize with it, like learning the flow of a river, rather than attempting to stop it. And slowly, patiently, they began shaping something that could outlast them entirely. They began shaping a lineage. This lineage was never meant to be large. In fact, it worked best when it was small enough to be overlooked, fragile enough to escape notice, and rare enough to avoid becoming a banner others might rally around. A great dynasty attracts ambition, but a nearly forgotten family drifts quietly through history. Its purpose was not strength in numbers, but precision, like planting a single seed and accepting that the bloom might not appear for hundreds of years. Many seeds would fail. Some generations would show nothing at all. But the gardeners did not measure success in seasons. They measured it in eras. The elder blood was not simply power waiting to be used. It was possibility waiting for the correct moment, like a door that only exists when someone arrives at the right place in the right hour. Those who guarded the lineage did not expect every descendant to matter. Most would live ordinary lives, unnoticed by history, and that was not failure. That was protection. Only once, perhaps once in many centuries, would the pattern align in a way that revealed the purpose behind the waiting. Many believed this bloodline would one day produce a person capable of walking between worlds, not metaphorically, not in dreams or visions, but in the simplest physical sense, stepping from one reality into another as easily as crossing a puddle in the road after rainfall. To them, the boundaries of existence were not walls but thin curtains, and the right presence could pass through without tearing them. Such a person would not merely change events, they would change possibilities themselves. Of course, time rarely respects plans, even those designed across generations. Began, and people carried their lives began, and people carried their lives across mountains and seas, without realizing they carried history within them. The lineage passed into unexpected families, crossed borders drawn long after its beginning, crossed cultures that never knew its origin, and eventually settled among humans who neither asked for it nor fully understood it. The design dissolved into chance, and chance reshaped the design. From that point onward, the story changed. Instead of guardians who observed quietly, there were kings who sought certainty. Instead of patience measured in centuries, there was fear measured in days. Instead of protection through obscurity, there was pursuit through recognition. Rumors traveled faster than understanding ever could, and once a whisper reached the throne, it rarely left unchanged. Power invites attention, and attention rarely remains gentle. Because once people believe someone holds the future in their veins, they stop seeing them as a person. A person can refuse, hesitate, choose their own path, but a future cannot be allowed such freedom. It must be secured, directed, contained. They see not a life but an answer to wars not yet fought, disasters not yet arrived, victories not yet won. They see a solution, and solutions in troubled worlds are rarely allowed to live quietly. They are watched, guided, guarded, and sometimes hunted, depending on who believes they have the greater claim. A child born under ordinary circumstances might grow beneath open sky and unnoticed seasons. But a child surrounded by expectation grows within walls long before any are built. Often it slept, hidden so completely that even its bearer lived an entire life unaware of carrying anything unusual. It appeared only as coincidence, unusual luck at the right moment, strange dreams that faded upon waking, or moments where time seemed to pause just a second too long, leaving behind a feeling rather than a memory. Most dismissed these as imagination, and the world continued unchanged. Then eventually, a child was born who carried not a fragment, not a faint echo, but the full inheritance, complete and undeniable in ways no one immediately understood. Nothing announced it. No sign marked the day as different. Yet small things shifted. Paths crossed unexpectedly. Decisions felt guided rather than chosen. And events began aligning as though drawn toward a quiet center. And the world, without knowing her name or her place, began to turn toward her anyway, slowly at first, like distant travelers choosing the same road by coincidence, and then with growing certainty, as if history itself had recognized something it had been waiting a very long time to meet. There are people who belong wherever they go, the sort who step into a room and, within moments, the space reshapes itself gently around them. Voices soften, chairs are offered, names are remembered. They leave footprints that feel welcome even before they arrive. And then there are people who never belong anywhere, no matter how many doors open for them, no matter how warmly they are greeted. The world makes room for them, but never truly keeps them. Their presence is always temporary, like a traveler resting beneath a tree that knows they will not stay until morning. The child of the elder blood lived her life in motion long before she understood what she was running from, or even that she was running at all. To her, movement felt natural, like breathing, leaving before roots could form, waking before comfort settled too deeply. Kingdoms searched for her in ways both quiet and loud, though many of them did not truly know what they would do if they found her. Messengers crossed borders carrying descriptions that never quite matched. Scholars argued over signs that might point toward her presence. Some rulers imagined protection, placing her safely within walls they controlled. Some imagined control itself, believing destiny could be directed if only it were held tightly enough. And some simply feared what might happen if someone else reached her first, because uncertainty often frightens more than danger. To her, it only felt like never being allowed to stay. A place could be kind, even gentle, and still she would sense the moment approaching when kindness would shift into expectation. The pattern repeated too often to ignore. A longer glance, a careful question, a conversation that paused when she entered the room. So she learned to leave before explanations were required. Departures became easier than introductions. She grew familiar with the sound of her own footsteps fading behind her, the quiet understanding that every shelter was temporary, even before the door closed. Sometimes she would dream of places she had never seen, deserts beneath unfamiliar stars that glowed in unfamiliar colors, cities whose towers stretched higher than mountains she had climbed, oceans so wide they seemed to erase the idea of shore entirely. The dreams felt vivid in ways ordinary dreams never were. The air had temperature, the ground carried texture, and the silence contained distant sounds she could almost recognize. Later, slowly and without anyone telling her, she realized these were not dreams at all. They were memories of moments she had slipped into and out of without meaning to. Brief crossings so gentle they left no mark except recollection. Her ability was not a skill she practiced or improved through effort. No mentor could teach it step by step. No exercise made it steadier. It was more like a door that sometimes opened when she was afraid. Not always, not predictably, but often enough that fear and escape became intertwined. A sudden noise, a tightening sense of danger, or the quiet certainty of being watched would loosen the world around her. And for a heartbeat, she would be somewhere else entirely. Then, just as suddenly, she would return, left with the same uncertainty she had carried before, only now accompanied by a memory that did not belong to the place she stood. And fear came often, not always loud or immediate, but present in small ways. The feeling of footsteps matching her pace behind her, the recognition of a symbol she had seen too many times in too many distant places, the knowledge that coincidence was rarely coincidence anymore. Even kindness could carry fear, because kindness sometimes arrived with questions that had no safe answers. What made it difficult was not only the power, but the attention it gathered around her like wind gathering leaves. Every mentor wondered what she might become, speaking gently while imagining futures larger than her own wishes. Every ruler wondered what she might accomplish for them, even those who insisted they sought only peace. Every enemy wondered how dangerous she could be if left alone, and decided caution required action. She lived at the center of expectations she had never agreed to carry. Very few wondered how exhausting it must be to live as someone everyone needed, but nobody understood. Fewer still asked what she wanted when there was no prophecy involved, no survival at stake, no future balanced upon her decisions. Questions about destiny filled rooms. Questions about rest rarely did. So she learned small comforts instead, the kind that could travel with her and ask nothing permanent in return. Campfires that warmed without belonging to any land in particular. Familiar voices that did not grow heavier with hope each time they spoke her name. The quiet presence of companions who measured her worth only in shared silence and simple survival. A shared meal tasted better than any feast prepared in her honor, because it required no performance. Laughter meant more when it was brief and unrecorded. Yet even then, the world did not leave her alone, because the bloodline promised more than movement. It promised change, and people are drawn to change whether they welcome it or fear it. Some believed she would save the world from an approaching winter that would freeze seas and silence winds, a stillness so complete that even memory would struggle to survive it. Others believed she would cause that very disaster, that her existence alone bent fate toward catastrophe. Each side felt certain enough to act. Imagine carrying both expectations at once, savior and destroyer, while still trying to decide who you are when no one is watching. Every step forward might fulfill hope or confirm fear, and neither belonged entirely to her. Choice becomes complicated when every outcome feels predetermined by someone else's belief. Perhaps that is why she kept moving, not always to escape pursuit, and not even to outrun danger, but to escape the weight of possibilities gathering behind her. Motion lightened them, even briefly. A path ahead contained fewer expectations than a place she had already stayed. As long as she walked, she remained only herself. Not yet an answer, not yet a warning, just a traveler whose story had not decided what it wished to become. For every legend, there are observers, the quiet kind who understand that history rarely reveals itself to those who rush toward it. They linger at the edges of events, patient as winter, letting others act first while they collect meaning afterward. The child's journey drew many such watchers, not because she announced herself, but because patterns tend to gather attention, even when they try not to. A life that bends coincidence again and again eventually becomes difficult to ignore. Some were scholars who saw her as a mystery to solve, a living question placed gently into the world. They followed rumors rather than footprints, comparing dates, tracing sightings separated by impossible distances, studying the spaces between events more carefully than the events themselves. To them, she was less a person and more a pattern that might unlock a deeper order beneath reality, and they valued understanding over possession, though understanding too can become a kind of claim if held tightly enough. Some were rulers who saw her as a future to secure. They did not always speak of conquest or domination. Often they spoke of stability, protection, prevention. A future is easier to face, they believed, when its uncertainties are gathered into a single place, a single life that can be watched and guided. They convinced themselves they sought safety for their people, and perhaps they did. But safety achieved by holding another person's path rarely remains gentle for long. Some were beings far older, who saw her as a doorway rather than a solution. Their interest carried no urgency, only recognition, the quiet attention one gives to a key long lost and suddenly rediscovered. They did not ride with armies or send letters sealed in wax. They simply noticed and continued noticing, because certain forces do not hurry when time has never limited them. Among all of them, one in particular became known through stories rather than sightings. He was recognized less by appearance and more by consequence. People spoke of meetings held in empty rooms, of conversations remembered clearly but never witnessed by others. He rarely threatened, rarely raised his voice, and rarely appeared frightening. Instead, he offered assistance at moments when people felt they had no other choice, appearing as calmly as if he had been expected all along. And he always kept his promises. That, more than anything else, made people uneasy. A threat can be resisted, a lie can be dismissed, but a promise fulfilled exactly as spoken leaves no argument to stand on. Yet promises, like reflections in still water, can be accurate and misleading at the same time. The surface shows precisely what is there, while depth rearranges what it means. He did not lie. He granted exactly what was requested. A king asked for victory and found his enemies defeated, though the peace afterward proved lonelier than defeat might have been. A merchant asked for fortune and discovered wealth arriving faster than friendship remained. A traveler asked never to be lost again and found every path afterward painfully predictable. Each request was honored in perfect detail, yet what people wanted and what they asked for were rarely identical things. Over time, stories gathered around him, not warnings spoken loudly, but recollections shared quietly, as though each teller wished to confirm the memory with another. Wishes fulfilled in ways that felt heavier than refusal. Gratitude mixed with uncertainty. Relief followed by contemplation. He did not take more than he was offered, and that made declining his help more difficult than accepting it. Strangely, he took interest not only in kings and warriors, but also in the wandering girl whose fate seemed larger than any throne. Not to capture her, nor to guide her, and never to interfere openly. He watched, as though her path might eventually intersect with his own designs in a way neither force nor persuasion could arrange. Some encounters are valuable precisely because they cannot be scheduled. Meanwhile, others searched more openly. Riders crossed night roads under dim lantern light. Hooves softened by mud, so their passing left little sound behind. Messengers carried sealed letters whose contents changed alliances before the seals were even broken. Mages studied forgotten texts until ink blurred and meaning shifted beneath tired eyes. Each believed understanding her would grant control over tomorrow. That knowledge, once gathered, naturally becomes authority. Yet tomorrow never behaves as expected. The closer anyone came to certainty, the further events drifted from prediction. Plans unraveled at the moment of completion. Agreements altered meaning before signatures dried. A path thought secure would narrow into uncertainty without warning, and the girl continued moving, sometimes knowingly choosing departure, sometimes guided only by instinct that urged her onward before danger revealed its shape. Because the elder blood did not simply grant power. It resisted ownership, slipping free from hands that tried to hold it, reshaping events just enough to avoid becoming anyone's possession. Like water cupped too tightly, it found space between fingers. And so the watchers kept watching, the seekers kept seeking, and she kept walking, the only one among them who never believed the future could be carried, only encountered. In the end, though endings rarely exist in old stories, and are usually only pauses mistaken for conclusions, the meaning of the bloodline was never entirely revealed. People searched for final answers the way travelers search the horizon for the edge of the land, certain that if they walk far enough they will find a place where uncertainty stops. But the horizon only moves with them, and so did understanding. Some winters passed quietly without catastrophe, the cold settling into valleys and leaving again as it always had. Some disasters arrived with no connection to prophecy at all, storms that followed weather rather than destiny, hardships caused by ordinary choices rather than ancient design. Life continued in the familiar way it prefers, farmers planting crops in soil that remembered many seasons before them, travelers sharing fires without caring whose stories were true, children growing into adults who only half remembered the rumors they once heard and felt no need to confirm them. The girl herself changed too, though not in the ways watchers once predicted. Not into a queen seated above others, not into a conqueror reshaping maps, but into someone who understood that destiny is often a story people tell when they wish uncertainty would behave more politely. When events refuse explanation, a prophecy gives them edges. When the future feels wide and unmanageable, a single figure gives it focus. She came to see that the weight she carried had never truly belonged to her alone. It had been placed there by the hopes and fears of countless strangers trying to quiet their own questions. Power remained within her, yes. Doors between worlds still opened when needed, sometimes in danger, sometimes in moments of quiet curiosity, when the air felt thinner than usual. Yet the urgency that once surrounded each crossing faded. The world did not end because she existed, nor was it instantly saved because she survived. Days still followed nights. Rivers still flowed in the same patient directions. People continued arguing over small matters that mattered deeply only to them, which turned out to be the way life prefers to continue. Instead, her presence became part of the world's many quiet balances, like tides rising and falling without asking permission, noticeable yet rarely alarming. Those who met her remembered a traveler rather than a legend, someone who listened more often than she spoke and left before stories grew heavy. Sometimes she stayed long enough to help mend a roof or share a road for a few miles. Sometimes she passed through unnoticed entirely, and those were often the gentlest visits of all. The grand expectations once attached to her softened into something easier to carry, until even she stopped measuring herself against futures imagined by others. And perhaps that is the gentlest truth hidden beneath grand prophecies. The future is rarely decided in a single moment, nor by a single life, no matter how unusual. It unfolds slowly across countless ordinary days. A conversation here, a decision there, a kindness offered without knowing why, until no one can say exactly when change began. By the time anyone notices, it has already woven itself into memory, indistinguishable from all the small events that allowed it to happen. So the tale of the elder blood continues not as a conclusion, but as a passing story told beside late-night fires. Some listeners stay awake to hear every word, leaning closer when voices drop, wanting certainty from the telling. Others drift into sleep halfway through, carrying only fragments with them into dreams where details rearrange themselves into softer shapes. Neither hears the story incorrectly. Old tales do not demand perfect attention. They only ask to be present while they last. Either way, The road goes on. The rain keeps falling softly. And somewhere in that wide world, a traveller walks beneath dim lantern light, not chased, not worshipped, simply continuing forward, because forward is where the path happens to lead. The night does not question her, and she does not question it. They share the same quiet agreement, that not everything must resolve before morning. And tonight, you can do the same. There is nowhere else to go, nothing left to figure out, no hidden meaning waiting just beyond the next thought. Only the steady rhythm of breathing, the distant echo of a story settling into silence, and the quiet sound of the tale fading gently into rest.